Hi, this is Jeff from the INTJ equation, and I'm joined again by Anita. We recorded this once, but I somehow didn't save the recording, so a redo. So I apologize about that. How are you doing, Anita? Do you want to tell the folks a little about yourself?
Yeah, pretty good. So nice to meet everyone. My name is Anita. I am 31 years old now. I am a professor in cultures and intercultural communication, and I like studying psychology in my free time, philosophy as well, right? So I'm always asking myself about the human condition, and I like figuring out how different people can work differently. So yeah, that's why I'm into it.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, we recorded this before. So we kind of have a little debacle here. We'll jump into that a little bit later. First, I know you have some interesting experiences with INTJs. Do you mind just kind of giving some of your experiences?
Yeah, for sure. I think I've met a few INTJs pretty up close, actually. I had a relationship with one INTJ when I was young, um, 15 years ago, um, lasted 3 years. I've also worked with one. I was business partners with one person I typed as an INTJ. And also had a pretty close friend as well for over 10 years who was an INTJ. So, yeah.
Did that close friendship end in a negative manner or
Yep, that happened. So basically, something happened, right? I think he probably didn't understand or didn't know how to deal with the fact that I was maybe frustrated with one of his comments, and which caused him to lash out, right? And basically send me very offensive words. So yeah, I pretty much decided that we should probably no longer be friends because I wouldn't be able to trust that person anymore. So yeah, that wasn't that long ago either. So basically, it took me a while to actually understand what was going on, because all I could see before I interpreted was, well, why is he basically trying to offend me? Why is he trying to hurt my feelings, right? Um, and then with enough digging, I tried to actually figure out what went wrong, right? From what I understood, INTJs can sometimes be a little bit puzzled about how others are feeling. You don't quite understand it very well, right? So you might actually feel also very anxious about like giving people bad experiences. So the moment he saw that I could have been frustrated with what he said, he might have freaked out, right? And it might have come out as that.
yeah, that's interesting you bring it up. I was just talking to somebody on Discord and she was really just trying to get me to empathize with her, but I was just struggling so hard with it. And we talked about this a little bit last time, I think, when we the first take on this. It's just kind of like we don't really have empathy, like saying that we don't really catch on to it's kind of an understatement. We just don't get it really. I mean, it's just like we try to use our TE or NI, we try to use other functions to kind of compensate for that. So like when someone's just wanting a shoulder to cry on, more or less, we kind of rationalize it and try to think of a plan to help them get out of that situation so they don't have to feel those negative feelings. And that just really kind of comes off as a long way. We kind of come off as arrogant or pompous, but it's our way of like helping people, because the way we kind of think of it is, if you weren't going through these problems, you could solve it, then you wouldn't feel these negative emotions. So maybe he got a little frustrated with that, possibly. I don't know the whole situation, of course.
Something that probably happens with INTJs, right? From what I understand, from the TE parent standpoint, right? You actually try to see situations through systems. So you actually also try to solve people's problems through a systematic way, which in theory should work, right? But it's different if you do it, for example, from an FE standpoint, when you actually pay more attention into the relationship, the relational differences and the nuances that happen in a relationship, right? I don't think feelers understand that any more than INTJs, but feeler types might be a little bit more at ease with the fact that you can't really understand people, which makes us maybe a little bit less anxious about actually trying to, yeah, figure out what is going on, right? I'm not sure. But I have realized that it is something that I think could help an INTJ, right? To actually realize that it's okay not to know, it's okay to ask questions as well, right? And to probably realize, especially with a few feeler types, for example, FI heroes, right? INFPs, ISFPs, or ENFPs, that they might want to talk about their feelings, or they might actually want to feel valid in their feelings. So it's something that INTJs can rationally understand, but probably, yeah, gets better with practice, right? And I don't think you guys don't feel empathy, but you probably don't know how to process it, right? Because I think the way that it comes across, the frustration can come across. You can actually read it in people's expressions, right? You have SE, you have extroverted sensations, so you can actually detect those things much better than, for example, an INFP would, right? But the question is how to process that information, right? You might be like, that's ambiguous. I don't know what that expression means. Are they being ironic? Are they being serious? How do I read that, right?
Yeah, I mean, just sometimes like, I don't know, just countless times throughout my life, like people will be talking to me and I have no clue what I said or did, but they get frustrated and very angry with me. And it's just like, I'm just like lost. Like, what did I do? What did I say? Then they're just kind of like, you know what you did, you know what you said, like you're an evil monster. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know. And it's just like wrecked countless relationships in my life. I mean, it doesn't give, you know, them, I mean, I can be a pompous ass, so I'll admit it myself. But you know, it doesn't give an INTJ or anybody else to start screaming or yelling or cussing at you just because, sorry, or something outside made a noise. Something got frustrated.
Well, yeah, I think, yeah, it can come out in different ways, right? It's definitely, I think it's also a challenge because having extrovert sensations and inferior function, you might sometimes lash out through it, right? And especially to an INFP, this can be quite intimidating. We have SE trickster, which means we never trust the function. We are always wary of it. We actually sort of perceive it as a kind of bullying, right? So if SE comes out, and even positive SE can be sometimes perceived that way, feels like someone is pushing us, is
Mhm.
actually overriding our introvert sensation, our side, because we want to be comfortable, and then all of a sudden, you know, we can actually blow up, for example, or yeah, a very short burst. So it's also a matter of whether the INFP, for example, would be mature to actually understand that it's just about a frustration. But it can be very intimidating to us to actually see extrovert sensation come out. So yeah, it can make it even more tricky, I would say.
Yeah, that's kind of like one of the only emotions that INTJs typically emote is kind of anger or frustration. I think that is due to the SE inferior. We're very impatient and we just kind of like want progress like very rapidly. Like we were discussing a little bit on Discord, it was like the whole movement versus control thing. Like INTJs, they have three of their egos, three of their personality types in different sizes of mine are movement, movement, movement. So we're triple movement. So we're just like fast, progress, progress, progress. And we don't have progress, we get frustrated. But yeah, I get it. We can definitely be ragey and mean and cruel, and we just don't stop and think like how's this gonna, you know, affect somebody else's feelings. So on all INTJs, I apologize on our behalf.
Well, I am no hard feelings, right? I do know, especially since I have yeah, I have seen INTJs up close, right? I do know that it's punctual bursts. Different people are going to have also different ways to deal with it, right? But the way I perceive INTJs, at least, is that they are actually very calm and composed. They can become very unstable if I think their NI is negated. So if, for example, something that I actually thought would be true or the predictions would be true ends up actually radically different than what I had initially planned. And especially if it involves people, because people are not predictable. We don't actually work through, I think, the system framework with which INTJs are so good. And that happened at my work, for example, right? At a point, at some point I actually felt like I was being in a way led to act in a certain way, and INFPs will be INFPs. TE inferior makes me basically want to rebel against it, and I'm like, fine, no, I won't do it, right? If she gave me basically two options, right? It's either I continue doing it the way I'm doing it, or I stopped going to the office. And I'm like, okay, sure, I'll stop going to the office. And I was totally nonchalant about it. And that was a very bad idea, because it basically just countered her idea, the idea that she had of me. So that's when she tried to lash out, right? Because she was very flustered. She didn't understand why would I act in an unpredictable way. And I think that's also a big challenge for INTJs, is like how to actually deal with the fact that people will not, by nature, be predictable, and how to actually accommodate that. Because the moment you actually try to lash out for that, you can end up pushing people away from you, right? Especially people who get their feelings hurt and who can actually take that into consideration. So I think that is something that can actually help INTJs as well, right? To actually try and, yeah, see the situation more for what it is, not take it personally if people are unpredictable, because that's just the way it's going to be, right?
Yeah, I agree. It's just like walking on eggshells with us and certain aspects of that. So it's definitely a challenge. So
Yeah,
what is it
I would
like
say
just
that,
having a low SE? How like you're either like a SE trickster or SE demon, or we're kind of debating that, I guess. How does that feel just having like a low SE?
well, I feel like I live in a bubble, to be honest. I don't notice things around me, right? I'm always paying attention to what something makes me feel, right? Both in the emotional level, but also in the sensational level. So it's quite strange, right? Because it can actually come out in random bursts. For example, like it can be out, right? And I'll be absorbed in my own thoughts, like when I'm walking, for example. But sometimes I can get a glimpse of how beautiful everything around me is, right? Walking on nature or something, and it can be like completely marvel, like, oh my God, the world is beautiful, life is beautiful. So it's quite interesting, right? Because it's as a default mode, I don't actually pay attention to my outer environments, right? And I don't feel at ease with it any as well, right? I actually I don't feel at ease when I'm, for example, like doing physical exercise. I feel uneasy, right? I can't live in the moment. I just can't, right? But yeah, it's always quite perplexing to be around SE users, especially SE inferior users, because you guys are very aware of it all the time, but it also can make you feel a bit uneasy sometimes, I feel, right? So you can't really take it in that much. And well, if we depart from the supposition that I'll be an INFP, that would mean I would actually be in the third position. For me, it's just funny, right? It's fun and play with it, right? So there's also some dynamics in here that can sometimes be interesting. Actually, I actually find it quite interesting, for example, to be in a relationship with an NTJ, because yeah, like I'm trying to be playful all the time, and they can sometimes be uneasy, but they kind of do enjoy it, because SE does enjoy SI. SE kind of is drawn to give experiences to SI, right? And SI enjoys it. So sometimes it can actually be a playful dynamic, but we definitely don't have SE. That I can tell you.
Yeah, I mean, I try something SI is something I try to understand too. I know we were talking a little bit about it in the Discord server today, which you can join down in the description below. Kind of like how we just don't like traditions, and some other, like one other INTJ is like, oh, I like this tradition, but I don't like that tradition. I think we're arguing like the sake of just having traditions, like tradition, like family values. Like some family members are just so bad and so evil, but they're still like high SI users, especially like SFJs are like, I don't care, that's my kid. I don't care how bad they treat me, how they rob me, they beat me. That's my kid. I'm never going to betray them. I think it could be unhealthy at a point. But that sounds like you set boundaries for you, like the INTJ started screaming at you and scared you, and you just cut ties with them. So
Yeah.
I think you having a lower SI maybe kind of, you could see like, okay, this is bullshit. I'm not going to put up with your crap, you know?
Yeah, that came with age, to be honest, right? I didn't used to be like that when I was younger, right? But basically, I became a little bit more at ease as well about using my own NI with my own internal experiences. So basically, what happens is, well, and I think that's a common thing for both INFPs and ENFPs. We work with trust. Our relationships are based on trust, and the moment trust is broken, it is hard to actually build it back, right?
Yeah.
In that case, it wasn't the first time he actually did that to me. It was the second time, as a matter of fact, and as I will remember, it was the second time in a few years. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, so that means it might happen again. Even if he regrets it, even if he apologizes profusely, the fact that he actually tried actively to play with my insecurities and to hurt my feelings stays. So I won't be able to trust him easily anymore. And at the moment, it makes it not worth it, right? So basically, it was a mix of NI, SI, and TE actually that basically makes me assess if something is acceptable or not acceptable. If something, it's not even about threatening my safety, but threatening my sense of trust, right? Because again, like that's also something with FI users, right? Especially high FI, we don't really define people or relationships, but we do pay attention to the nuances of the person behind the relationship, right? And yeah, for me, it was simply a fact of, well, we were great friends and I really, really enjoyed talking to him and he helped me grow throughout those 10 years. But it wouldn't be possible for me to continue talking to him and feel at ease with that. So it was just simpler for us both if we just parted ways, right?
Yeah, I get it. That's one big topic we talked about in the last podcast that didn't get recorded was kind of like I brought up like I've scared many INFPs away in my life, and just like some advice like you can give to an INTJ. So you have to keep the trust. Definitely can't hurt your feelings. And
Well, we actually can handle having our feelings hurt. What we
really,
can't handle is ill intent, right? That's the thing, right? That it depends, of course, on how healthy the type is, right? Because I've met INFPs that also handled having their feelings hurt badly, right? But I don't mind, for example, if someone accidentally hurts my feelings, right? Problem if you're actually trying to do it on purpose. And since we do have any, it's very easy to pick up on that. We
yeah.
basically see intent on people, right? So that's also something INTJs need to be aware of, is that we don't fully understand all nuances of NI, but we can pick up on intent. And that's the moment when when it actually doesn't work out with me and INTJs, the moment I actually see that they're doing something with a specific intent and I have 100% certainty that it couldn't have been an accident, that it was actually on purpose, right? But of course, it will depend, I think, on the level of maturity of the INFP. I think the most important thing is to actually realize that, well, FI is our hero function. So it is very important for us to actually take it into consideration. That doesn't mean that we're paying attention to our feelings all the time. But sometimes if we feel frustrated, for example, or if something bad happens, we can actually stop functioning. And we need to actually take care of that feeling before we get back to it. And we're naturally good at it, but we also need to be respected and in a way validated into that. We need to actually feel in a safe environment to actually realize our feelings are valid. We're going to come back to normal, right? But we're going to actually be able to process it, right? And we process it internally. And I think a challenge for INTJs is that you guys have FI as a child function, right? So you kind of play with it in a way, right? And that could also cause for you to see people who have FI hero as a little bit childish. Because why do you take it so seriously? Why are you using it all the time? Which can obviously trigger FI hero, right? Especially since it's a judging function. We just get flustered because we're like, well, no, that's my feelings. They're very valid. That's It's my also with sets of values, right? We take our values very, very seriously and build upon them, right? And we can seem more inflexible than we actually are when we actually speak about them. And INTJ can be very nonchalant about it, right? You can actually try and play with them. So yeah, sometimes some sort of imbalance can come from that, right? I think that would definitely have help if you are an INTJ and you're actually trying to make contact with INFP. Try to actually be respectful that the fact that something that you actually take as a child function is pretty much their whole lives, right?
Yeah. I think that's kind of like we get frustrated because that's the big loop we get stuck in. The NIFI loop is kind of like, well, I want to do this, but I feel worthless and I can't, or I don't feel like it because it's hard. Then we know we got to realize we got to use our TE and our SE to kind of get out of that loop and extrovert and kind of make it happen. So I think we kind of get frustrated when we say like, okay, I've been in this like victim mentality state before and I see it happening in other people, but we just got to realize, okay, this person just feels more emotion like almost all the time. And we kind of just think, rationally rather than feel. We kind of like got to use our FI as like a compass, like these are our values and we got to do what we want and it has to match our values.
I think it's a matter of preference, right? Because the one secret weapon that INTJs have when they actually want to interact with INFP is that you guys actually have strong TE, but you're not hero TE users. I'm not sure if that's a common point for all INFPs, but hero TE users can make me very intimidated, right? But INTJs are also naturally perceivers, actually have intuition here, right? Which is a perceiving function. And but you also try to act with TE. We find that really cool. We find that really, how can you do that so well, right? We have TE in fear. It's basically our aspirational function. We want to be good at it. We're not naturally very good at it though, right? So it can actually really draw us to INTJs as well, right? But it can be a problem if we actually feel like our FI is being invalidated, right? And I think that's also why we could feel intimidated. TE fascinates and intimidates us. So yeah, but you also still have FI, so we actually do feel a sense of familiarity, right? And it tends to be an interesting dynamic, but I think it will also depend on the INFP and how comfortable they feel with the E and how much they want to work with their own TE.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you with TE heroes. They're probably the most problematic types I've had problems with, especially ESTJs. They're kind of like the slave traders cracking a whip, like you need to do this, you need to do that, and they're taking away my free will, and my free will is kind of like everything, like you're trying to take away my choice. It just doesn't really work well with me. So I can see how it can be intimidating. To me, it's just annoying.
Especially if they have an SI parent, right? Because that's going to be your demon function. So it means you actually project it into others. And in that case, it's basically exactly what they're projecting, right? So there can be a lot of conflict can come from that, I would imagine. Yeah,
I remember I had an ESTJ judge when I was going through like a child custody thing, and he was just all about like, well, the woman is supposed to be the primary caregiver to children, even though, problems here and there. It's like, this is tradition. This is what's supposed to happen. Like, that's just ignorant. It's really ignorant. Like you should there should be justice, fair, who was the better parent at the time, not tradition, like what has been in the past.
Yeah,
kind of
that is definitely a common thing with ESTJs, right? I don't know if that's probably a me thing, right? I also have trouble with ESTJs specifically, right? I don't mind ENTJs that much, but ESTJs trigger me. I think it also comes from the fact that they have SE critical parent, and it comes out, right? It really comes out. They're basically, why are you not wearing the clothes that you're supposed to be wearing? I worked with one ESTJ, right? And we actually had a jury together, and she would pay a lot of attention to whether students were dressing accordingly. A lot of attention, right? Half of our deliberation time would be given to how were they dressed, right? And my silly SE trickster, I'm like, really? They were dressing badly. She was very triggered at one student that actually is reading notes, but from their phone instead of a piece of paper, right? The fact that they're using their phone is not traditional in a way, right? You
Yeah.
shouldn't be doing that. And I'm like, wow, I think a lot of professors actually read from their tablets when they're, doing lectures. So yeah, basically, since I have SI child, I'm like, well, I actually understand traditions, but I also think they're silly, right? I think they're silly, and I think they need to actually be reflected upon. So I think, yeah, I definitely don't have a good time with SI parents specifically, right? I can imagine how it would be even harder for someone who doesn't have pretty much any SI, right? It can be complicated, I imagine.
Yeah, it's like one big discussion we're having, like, we don't really value traditions. I guess we value certain traditions that make sense to us or kind of get us what we want. Like, that's one reason why I do judo, because it's just very honorable and tradition, and it kind of gives you that discipline and that focus. That's one aspect I try to get out of it, because it's just something I really lack. I kind of just force my way through all my goals. I don't really take the time to discipline myself and think like long term in that sense. Like, I just kind of use my everything and burn myself out pretty much. But anyways, I want to talk to a little bit about like the INFP, ENFP thing here. So what makes you resonate with the INFP archetype so much?
Okay, so basically, I think that's something that we actually talked about in our previous podcast, right? I am, or I think I am, an INFP, right? We're never 100% sure. But you said that I basically sound like an ENFP, right? And you actually think it could be an ENFP. Um, I have had a lot of trouble, and I've had actually an identity crisis on the previous months, actually wondering if I wouldn't actually be an ENFP that just found her confidence, right? That had no confidence in the past and basically thought that this meant I was introverted, right? I still do think I'm INFP because when I look back, especially my during my childhood, right? I remember I used FI a lot, and that grown-ups would pay a lot of attention to my FI, right? I basically grew up with a parent and an aunt that had FI demon. So they would let me know that I was using FI all the time, right? I would be dramatic, I would be very complicated, I would be emotional, right? So I actually learned that that wasn't the normal thing, right? So that's one reason. The other reason is that TE inferior makes more sense to me than SI inferior, because I definitely feel like I want to work on my TE all the time. But then, well, you could actually tell me that that could come from TE child as well, right? Whereas I know that my memory sucks, but or like my SI memory sucks, or that I don't necessarily pay attention to SI, but it doesn't phase me as much, right? So that are the main reasons, right? I know I can actually emulate, and I can actually put my extrovert functions out quite easily. And I can have a good time with them, but that's also a newfound skill, to be honest. I didn't used to be like that when I was younger. So I don't know. I wonder. You said that maybe I could be an ENFP, right? Would that be like specific reasons for that? Like, did you detect maybe more extroverted functions? And I wonder if actually that could happen to people, for example, other INTJs or anyone else, right? They actually mistype someone as an extrovert because they're extroverting, for example, or maybe it's even maybe it's even because I'm an extrovert. I don't know. What do you think about it?
I get the impression of ENFP because one, you do seem like you have a lot of movement. You talk really fast. INFPs are kind of they're controlled. They're slow. They take their sweet time. You kind of jump from one topic to another. You move around in your chair, make a lot of hand gestures, like I do, and I'm fidgeting and stuff like that. Like you move from Brazil to France to Denmark. I mean, that's just a lot of like change, 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 change. Like they're always constantly wanting to change. And INFP would kind of like, oh, I don't know if I feel comfortable with that. I think you're very well developed ENFP, and I think you might be going to your INSTJ dual side. I think that's why you're like really scholarly. Why you're a professor. What 4 languages? I think you said
5. Yeah.
five. Wow, there you go. I think that's just like you're really unlocking that SI. And, you know, like I can remember 5 languages. I stumble with one pretty much. And another way you kind of bring up a lot of new topics you're initiating. Initiating is kind of way of saying extroverted. Like you keep asking my like opinion. I could definitely see the TE. You're asking me what I think, but you're kind of like changing the subject. Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? So I think you change the subject a lot more, and INFPs will kind of stay more on topic.
I wonder. Yeah, I don't know. Like for me, the thing that I actually feel like that's definitely true, right? What you're saying about me, I've always spoken very, very fast. But for example, like with the fact that I've moved countries and that I'm actually constantly putting myself out of my comfort zone, that's a very, yeah, like I do it on purpose, right? I feel very uncomfortable all the time. I feel terrified, right? Very terrified. But I think that's also what NE does, right? That's something that actually NE is great at, is basically telling yourself, what are the possibilities? This can go great. This can be good for your own growth, right? So do it. But it's definitely a challenge. Every time I actually deal with my comfort zone, right, I can actually feel that divide, right? But yeah, I can actually also say that it is possible to actually practice that, right? I've been teaching for over 10 years. I think that also makes me, I think, more fluid than your average INFP, because I like learning with people and I want to learn from people. So I decide to act that way. But I'm not sure it's innate thing, to be honest. I'm not sure. Could be. I don't know. But it makes sense. It makes sense what you're telling me, because yeah, that is true. I'm not sure though that INFPs would naturally, for example, speak slower. I think it also depends on how fast they think, to be honest. Because I typically think speak very fast because I think fast, and I also want to actually express all those opinions. TE, right? But yeah. It could be. It could be. I'm still not convinced, right? Either being an INFP or an ENFP. Could be. I don't know.
Yeah, another clue I kind of get is like your experience with INTJs. It sounds a lot like the socionics pedagogue relationship, which is like a teaching relationship. Like you kind of learn from each other. Like you learn a lot from INTJs and vice versa. And now you said your current boyfriend you live with is an INFJ. That would be your highest compatibility cognitive function wise. So I think that kind of, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I don't know
Good.
how well, you know, your guys' relationship and everything like that works, but
It could. At the same time, I also feel that I'm probably becoming even more fluent at my already overused NE, because also because I'm living with an NFJ, right? Because I can also tell you that sometimes few conflict points come from that, right? I basically NE tends to be very drawn to an I, right? So that happens with INTJs as well, right? I'm naturally attracted to INFJs and INTJs, not only on the sexual level, right? I just like talking to them. I want to understand things from them. And but at the same time, especially in my relationship, I can be sometimes like, why are you not paying attention to me, right? Pay attention to my feelings, pay attention to who I am. So again, I'm not sure that I could actually come from a slight divide between, you know, like being two introvert types, or if that could come from the fact that NE, since it's also drawn to an I, it's not concerned as much with paying attention to itself. I don't really pay attention to what I want. I don't even know what I want, right? Most of the time. So it could be either one or the other, right? I definitely learned a lot from INTJs, right? But I also think it's not exclusive to INFPs. I think it really depends on if you can actually see what you guys can actually bring. And you guys are amazing at actually seeing where a system will go. And that's just something that, yeah, like mesmerizes us, right? Like, how can you do that, right? And how could I do that? Could I do that? So definitely there is some sort of mentorship relationship here, because yeah, definitely learning a lot from one another. But yeah, I am still not sure. Yeah.
yeah, I think the biggest complaint I have with MBTI is because it's a test and like they're finding out, you know, there was like 1962 when it was released, and that was a very long time ago. And I think it's just really outdated and relevant information. I mean, it was useful for the time, it was good for what we had, but it's a test and we have different sides of our minds. So you could take the MBTI at one time and an hour later you're hungry and take it again, you might be in a different side of your mind and test something different. And I don't mean to be insulting here, like TE users are really susceptible of it, but like lower TE users, like once they get like that credential, like telling them like, oh, this person made this test, and they kind of get that idea like, okay, this is what the result is. It's legitimate, and it's not always legitimate. I think tests are flawed to begin with. I think tests just teach you how much you can cram, do the test, and forget the next day. That's what a test
Yep.
is to me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're right about that, actually. Bad TE can definitely do that to you. We don't necessarily check the source's credibility. We just want to believe it because someone else said it, right? Tests are definitely flawed. And a difficult thing to actually determine whether you are, for example, in my case, I am, I'm having a minor identity crisis on whether I am extroverted and introverted. And I imagine I'm not the only one, right? What I would say to people that actually would be in that situation is you don't actually have to be sure. You can actually still be fluid, right? Because again, like when you have different sides of your mind, you can actually be both. And you are going to be both in different situations, right? You put on a mask and you just try to be what you actually think you need to be for a certain situation, right? And but I think it's also very it's hard to actually determine with hard facts, right? If you actually are an introvert or an extrovert, for example, because you might feel like you're like some way, but you might actually show another side to the world, right? And that can sometimes be, that can sometimes be different and can sometimes be confusing, right? But it's definitely complicated because it's not only because test results, right? I always come out as introverted in test results. I am pretty sure I am introverted, given the way I actually interact with people. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I have an introverted hero function. So yeah, it's very, very difficult actually to determine what one would be in that case, right?
Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit earlier on Discord, about like the spectrums of how like the functions, like some are more introverted and some extroverted. ENPs in general, like ENTPs, ENFPs they're probably the most introverted of the extroverts, really. I think extroverted intuition, it's still kind of like they process outside information, so they're kind of still thinking and processing that, and they don't really engage as much as like an SE or FE user who are very extroverted. And FI is very introverted too. So I think they have it's technically an extroverted function, but it's backed by a very introverted function. So I think that makes them quite introverted. Like an ENTP has TI parent, and that's very introverted too.
Sure.
Like I was saying, like NI users, like NI, I think is more extroverted of it for an introverted function, really. INTJs, they kind of get stuck in like a down pit where they're very introverted. But I think kind of like we realize, okay, if we want this, we have to go out into the world and interact with people to get this. So I think that kind of brings us out of our introverted shell.
I think it could also be because an eye is very dependent on, like I said, like basically need outer information in order to actually feed your NI, right? So the more information we have, the more experiences you have, the better, the more predictions you can make, basically, right? The more you can actually basically funnel everything into a theory of the universe and everything, right? So maybe that could also be a matter of how functions are used, right? The way I actually perceive FI, for example, FI is very thought heavy, right? I'm basically thinking all the time, right?
Yeah.
You can basically put me in an empty room and I'll be staring into a wall for hours sometimes, just thinking, right? Just basically thinking and trying to actually come up with abstract concepts, right? And I've noticed that NI users, NI heroes, right, tend not to really function that way. You actually need to absorb more things and you actually work them more internally, more passively even, right? Whereas if you have an introverted judging function, you tend to actually actively work it, right? I actually do wonder how that works with an INTJ specifically, because you guys also have a FI, right? How does that work, like internally? How does the NI actually interact with FI?
Well, I think like the backtrack a little bit, like our NI, like if we're not taking in any information with our SC, not getting new experiences or not getting any new information with our TE, our NI just gets stuck on a loop with our FI, and we just kind of like, well, I want to do this, but I'm so insecure, or I don't feel like it, or I'm lazy, or I just don't know how, because we're not gathering that logic. We don't use TI as much. We're very critical of ourselves with our TI. So like TE, like we were arguing about this in Discord too. I don't know if you're a part of that conversation. I can't remember, but TI is logic, like kind of like coming up with your own thought, and TE is the observation of other people's logic.
Yeah.
So if we're not observing other logic, or we're not getting outside experiences from the world, we're the most useless people in the world. Like especially INFJs, they like, we are very insecure. Like we want to be useful and helpful. I think INFJs are worse about this than INTJs. But if we don't go out and interact with the world, then we're useless. Then we realize, okay, the more we interact with the world, the more useful we can become.
That could come from TI critic as well, right? To just feel like if you actually try to build your inner logic, it's not really valid, I would imagine, which could actually make like a not unhealthy, right? But an FI that's trying to actually basically bounce from TE, and basically you get the bad side of FI, right? The FI that actually tells you you suck, you're bad, you need to do something better, because it's also coupled with TE as well, right? Basically can measure how you're doing as well, right? I would imagine.
Yeah, with our FI, we're really hard on ourselves. Our FI, it's like our value system. Like I said, it's kind of like, do I feel right or wrong about this? Is like, I want this, but is it right? And I think, we can be a very unhealthy where like, I don't care about other people, how other people feel. So we got to kind of put ourselves in their shoes rather than emote with them, like emote their feeling. So we got to like, okay, this is what they're feeling. I've been in this situation before and it sucked. I got out of it. We, with our TI critics, cynics, whatever you want to call it, it's kind of interesting. We're very critical of our own thoughts and we think we're stupid. It could also think that other people think like us. Like for almost my whole life, I thought other people think like me. They come to the same conclusions and get data the same way I do. And that's just like, that's why I'm just so different from people. And I get so frustrated. Like, how come you don't see this? Like, how come you don't see things my way? Then
Okay.
I think that's kind of how it works against us. And so we got to use it to kind of like verify our TE, because like we could be very susceptible to it. Like, because I took the MBTI test 7, 8, 9 years ago, whatever. I took it 4 times, 4 different tests. I have to verify with my TI. I have to make sure that it's correct. The first 2 times I got INTJ. The other 2 times I got INFJ and INTP. Then like, okay, this test is flawed, and I immediately dismissed it. Then I was talking to a therapist a few years later, and she told me like, you seem like an INTJ, and like it went back to the TI critic because I felt I was like really stupid, like I'm dumb, but I wasn't really like educating myself, because I always like, with my TI critic, I was like, I really want to think of like my own original thought. I want to like invent something new, but we're not really meant to do that. We're meant to get this little piece of this, a little piece of this, a little piece of this. I see it building like a stone wall. Like our NI is like, okay, I want this. So we get our TE, we put that there, mortar it, put another stone, put another stone, put another stone. Then eventually we have this big solid wall. That's kind of like, it's just piece by piece by piece. We take a little bit of this system. Like we're generalists, not like masters of things. We generalize and learn a lot of different things instead of like learning one thing. That makes sense.
Makes sense. It makes sense. And besides, I guess you actually, you basically extrovert your TE through action as well, right? So you actually need to act upon it, which might be where the cynics or the critic is actually, bouncing off from, right? Basically, is if you're not doing something, if you're not acting through your TE, then you're going to be asking yourself, what am I doing with my life, right? What should I be doing here? Because I feel like I can actually feel the same way with an E, right? If I'm not actually providing people perspectives, right? Or if I'm not actually working through my perspectives, I feel like I am not necessarily relevant, right? Because an I critic can also be pretty brutal, right? In that sense, can keep trying to actually find the worst case scenario and saying, well, you're gonna get there. You're gonna get there because you're not being your best self, right? You're not respecting, you're not living up to your FI. So it could be also like on due to how the function itself externalizes itself, right? But basically you need to act through TE, and it's important for you because it will also calm down your own inner critic, right? So yeah.
Okay, another thing too, I was arguing with another INTJ on the Discord server too. It just kind of came to mind earlier. Like we're talking about like SC users versus SI users with like athletic competence, basically. And you said that exercise makes you feel uncomfortable and uneasy, right? Because you're an SI user. I mean, he was arguing like that doesn't make any sense and stuff like that. I think SI users can be really good at certain, especially like martial arts and dance, where it's like you have to memorize it and do it over and over again and
Right.
repetition. Because I could pick it up, like I could watch somebody do something like a judo move or something like that. And I could just watch it a few times and I can kind of get it. But can you do that with something like that? Like you see, I don't know if you ever danced or did anything like that. You could like just watch something do it. And like I learned like I could kind of half-ass moonwalk. I just kind of like watched people do it and I just say, okay. And I just kind of played around with it a few times and I kind of did it. I don't know. How do you like pick up on the physical environment, basically? I guess with like either FE or SE trickster or demon, you probably don't a whole lot. I mean, I have hard time understanding SI, I guess, like how it works.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, maybe I'll start by talking about other people actually, because when you're talking about that, it makes a lot of sense to me. I have seen that with high SI users. They're so good about they're so good with choreography, and especially for an SI hero, right? You actually feel proud of it. So you actually your memory, right? You want to actually be good with your memory. So the problem with me, for example, like choreography has always bored me because I don't see the point, right? I don't really see the point at all, right? Like, or didn't when I was younger, right? Like those different kinds of, exercises that you have at PE, for example. Because then, okay, you memorize a choreography. What good does that do to anyone, right? What does it produce? I think it can actually manifest itself in different ways for different people, to be honest, because I'm pretty sure INFPs or ENFPs even could be amazing dancers. And dancing is a beautiful art, right? I just didn't see the relevance for myself, right? I find martial arts also very fascinating, right? I find them beautiful. But at the same time, like I actually personally really enjoy sports. I love them, especially sports that actually make me move because it activates my thinking processes, right? But I don't feel, let's say, comfortable with it, right? I've noticed, for example, if I run with an SE user, they typically just, yeah, it's just like they process it differently, right? If you run with like a high SI user, at a certain point, they'll be like, well, no, I don't feel comfortable anymore. I want to stop, right? I think, for example, when I do sports, I do it more through TE. I basically say, well, no, I want to accomplish this, right? I'm going to do it. And I'm going to enjoy then endurance sports, for example, things that actually are constant. And that might come from SI, to be honest, because it also allows for me to feed my FI. But then there is a goal, right? I know why I'm doing it. I'm doing it in order to meditate, for example. I'm doing it in order to actually process my thoughts. I'm doing it in order to be the person I want to be. So it becomes a very rational process, right? Before I actually came to that conclusion, I just saw no point in any kinds of exercise at all, right? But I think different people live it differently. I think I know a lot of INFPs just hate sports, won't do anything that has anything to do with it, right? ENFPs as well, but I also know others that actually like it, right? So it really depends, I think, on how you see it, to be honest, for intuitives in general, and especially intuitive feelers. You need to see a point to it, basically. We don't do it for the sake of the sport, that's for sure.
Yeah, I haven't verified this myself, and maybe he was pushed into it, but Michael Jackson's like an INFP, and he's like considered the greatest dancer in the world, you know.
That can make
So,
sense,
but I know his dad was like a real asshole and pretty much made his kids make him rich, basically, from what I hear. So, and this hour really flew by real quick. I like to ask the baseline questions that I ask everybody, so we kind of get a better understanding of each other. We kind of already answered it, so we won't go over it too much. Just kind of want to hit it home for people. What do you want to say to help INTJs understand you a little bit better? I know you discussed like the trust and validating your feelings and things like that, right?
There are two things, to be honest. The first thing would be realize your own self-worth, right? We do look up to INTJs, and that's a good thing, right? So you can actually be very dynamic with that. But you should also, I think, especially if you are planning to actually have a close relationship with an INFP or an ENFP, even close friendships, communication is key, I think, between those two types, right? Because since you have a TE preference, you should actually tell us about your intent, right? It doesn't come out naturally from an I user, but that can actually also help us understand what you're trying to do, right? Because otherwise, if we only see TE, some NFPs can be definitely intimidated by that, right? Especially INFPs. The second thing would be, pay mind to the FI interactions, right? And realize that something that is very important to us could be something of relative importance to you, right? And try to actually work that out through communication as well. I think it's one of the most interesting relationships when it comes to growth, for sure. For us, INFPs, because it allows for us to actually develop our TE, right? And for you, because it allows for you to actually have some input from an E. It's also not a balanced relationship in the sense that we actually don't feed each other's, let's say, aspirationals, but it does bring very interesting growth for both sides. But there needs to be a lot of communication, and you need to be very aware that if you actually act in a way that breaks our trust, that could end up being permanent, right? So try to be very, very aware of the actions that you could cause that could actually break trust.
Yeah, I've always been drawn strongly to INFPs. ENFPs kind of freak me out a little bit because they're just so, hey, how's it going, in your face and stuff like that. But I've learned to understand them. I can really admire them, and I really like them too now. I didn't really meet as many ENFPs. I did INFPs. I'm not sure why. Usually like an INTJ and they're all over them, but I don't know. The opposite question: what do you want to understand more about INTJs? What would you like to know to kind of get in our heads and kind of see things the way we see?
Me personally, right? And I think that will also vary from an INFP to INFP, to be honest. That interaction between NI and TE, right? Like, or for example, like how exactly do you conceptualize everything that you actually, learn, and how do you form your own universe, right? It's something that it's very hard to understand because it's so introverted, you guys, right? Like you actually don't necessarily talk a lot about the vision you have, but you have it, and it's very strong. We can actually feel you have it, right? So that is definitely something I'd like to understand. Like, how does that, how do those, points connect in your mind, right? And what is your vision, basically, right?
It's confusing. We don't talk about it a lot because people think we're crazy. It's true. We dream up this big idea, like of kind of like what we want, how we see our own future. Then ideally we would use our TE to research how to get there. Then just rapid speed. It's so quick. My thoughts are so quick. That's why I stumble over my words, because I think about 30 times faster than I can talk. And I talk real fast too. But it's just like we read this and we throw out the good, we throw out the bad, we throw out the good, and just rapid, fast. Then we kind of just connect those dots. Then we kind of like, okay, this is kind of like I have a game plan in my head. Then I got to verify it with my TI cynics and see if it's true. Then we usually got to check 3-4 times to make sure that we're absolutely right. Then we use our FI, like, is this right? Is this good? Is this bad? Is it evil? Is it, malevolent towards somebody? Is it going to help the world? Is it going to hurt the world? We can have we can have a very toxic FI. I think like I'm starting to kind of get a sense like our functions are kind of like on a spectrum. Like our NI could be like, okay, this is what I want. I could be Dr. Doom or whatever and want to take over the world, or I could save the world, kind of like that. Or it could be like, oh, I feel really horrible, like I don't care if I kill everybody in the process, or like, I want to save as many lives as possible. And more mostly in the middle, or well, ideally. But that's kind of how it goes. And of course, like, okay, I have my game plan, I know how I feel, I got to use my SE to bring it out into the world.
It's okay. Okay. I think I would say I can understand how yeah, you'd be seen as crazy by a lot of people, right? But if you're an INTJ that happens to know an INFP or an ENFP, those are the kind of people that can actually open up to you and can actually also use one another in order to actually yeah, grow, right, and actually build those processes and refine those processes with the help of another perspective, right? Because I understand that actually from external circumstances, right, and I can be extremely misunderstood. It can be seen as eerie, right, as almost creepy, because like why do you actually think about what's going to happen, right? But it's definitely not the case for any users. It fascinates us, right? So yeah, maybe that's also something that actually INFPs and ENFPs have to offer to INTJ specifically.
Absolutely. Because I love bouncing ideas. They're like some of the only people I could talk to. Like, well, okay, you need to be committed into a hospital, pretty much. Or you're like, like, what are you smoking or whatever. So I think it's good. And they can kind of see like other alternatives too. Like they kind of have like uh, a broad, like a more wide scope, like NI is like straight down the line, and NI is kind of like shorter distance, but it's spread out more. And they can
Yeah,
kind of see, like, we're focused, but they can kind of see the details, if that makes any sense, like the little things.
yeah, and he
And
can
they,
be more observant in that sense because we actually are very attuned to how things could actually turn out, right? We
yeah,
don't have that sort of long-term vision that you guys have, right? So that's definitely something that's beautiful and that actually needs to be cultivated, but probably couldn't be shared with anyone and everyone spontaneously because it can actually, yeah, not necessarily go well in the outer world, right? But yeah.
yeah. If we try to explain our ideas to a sensor who doesn't understand typology or MBTI or whatever, we're just kind of like, even then, they're just concrete as a sidewalk. They just don't get it. They kind of see like, you're crazy, dude. But all these ideas, they came from somewhere. They were just an imagination. They were just in the universe, and someone made it happen. We just kind of make things happen, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing as well, right? Because society does have a lot of SI users. I think there are more SI users out there than SE users. Especially strong SI users are going to have next to no NI, right? If you
Mhm.
have hero SI, you actually have demon NI, so you basically project with that. If you have trickster NI, it's just as bad. So many people will be like, "What are you doing there?" Right? Like, how does that make any sense?
Yeah.
But so I can understand how that would actually be a challenge to NTJs. Again, it is something that fascinates us. So you should actually, and you could work with that with us. Would I think generally be happy to actually hear about NI because we also are starved from NI, right? There's not a lot of NI, a strong NI in the world. So it's definitely something that draws us for sure.
Yeah, it's, for some reason we're the minority, I guess, to kind of keep us grounded, I think, because we can get too far out there and think about the future. That's one thing about INTJs and INFJs. I'm sure we're so focused on the future, we don't know what's going right in front of our face sometimes.
Mm.
The big flaw we have. But anyways, we're coming up on an hour. I don't want to make this too long. You're one of my favorite guests I've had. I had like five, but I love talking to you. I'm glad we re-recorded this. I think our second conversation was probably better than our first. So hopefully we'll have more down the future.
I hope so. I hope so. I hope it's helpful for everyone out there. And yeah, I hope that can actually also help you guys approach INFPs and ENFPs because I think it's definitely a very rich relationship that's worth being cultivated.
Any last words you'd like to give to the audience out there before we go?
Thank you, everyone. And yeah, be happy, interact, don't be afraid of people, and yeah, communicate. Communicate is important.
Communicate. It's hard, but it's essential. if you like what you saw, I am releasing some YouTube videos. Please like, share, subscribe. Tell me, leave me a comment what you liked, what you didn't like, what we can improve upon. That's what I and TJ's really like is feedback, so we can improve on what we are doing wrong, because we often don't know what we're doing wrong until we're told so. Anyways, thank you for going beyond the clickbait, and have a great day.